That with the hour of 6 having arrived, I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting for Monday, February 27th to order. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Gentes.
Here.
Commissioner Hawley.
Here.
Commissioner Chorin.
Here.
Commissioner Bach.
Here.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer. Commissioner Lemke. Commissioner Jim Schaefer. Alderman Parrish.
Here.
Mayor Nurbin.
Here. Before we jump into the agenda, just a few ground rules. If you haven't figured it out already, we've changed the microphones, so you'll need to push and hold to talk. So it's a little getting used to, but it does make the audio much better, having a test run this a couple weeks ago at Common Council. After that, we've got two cancellations this evening. The first is Gerald Nell for the proposed car wash at the mobile station at Mequon and Wauwatosa Roads. And the Swan Ridge Farms item is also canceled. So if you're here for them, you get to leave early. And then, of course, if you'd like to comment on any item on the agenda, please fill out the comment cards in the rear and give them to Robin here. She had her hand up. And then that way we can get you more easily recorded into the minutes. With that said, we have approval of the minutes from last month's meeting, January 23rd.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, corrections, or otherwise? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Next up, we have our first canceled item, so we'll move right past that towards item 3A. Lance Garrett, this is a potential reconsideration. We will first need a motion to reconsider before we can take it up.
Enough. Oh, there it is. I move to reconsider this item. Is that the right phrasing?
Second.
Motion and a second, that is correct. All in favor of reconsideration, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, this matter is back before us. Why doesn't Cole give us a quick overview?
Let's see if I can get this mic thing figured out here. So this item's back for reconsideration of removal of two specimen trees at 12333 North Lake Shore Drive. On the engineering side, I'll just briefly go over the engineering stuff and then I'll pass it off to Mike for the specimen tree items. The previous recommended approval conditions, at least on engineering's behalf, have been all met as part of the resubmitted grading plan and house placement as found in the packet. That included, at least on the engineering side, the meeting of the wetland protective area, the elevation of the house, as well as some other drainage items we had included. The remaining conditions pertain to the green infrastructure plan that the applicant will be subject to with the added impervious area. So those are still included as part of engineering conditions. I'd just like to note that other drainage specifics will be addressed with the final grading plan as part of the building permit application. And then if I could pass it off to Mike for the tree stuff.
Thank you. As I think I told you guys in the past, that the two trees that are still going to need to come down, regardless of the positioning of the house, as spoken about at the last couple of meetings, are the 21-inch linden and the 25-inch red oak. Regardless of the placement of the home, because of the restrictiveness of the lot, both of those trees needed to come down. So nothing is changing from that perspective. With the 50-foot setback being adhered to, there's also the 31 trees that we had kind of talked about the last time at the last meeting. 11 of those trees will be preserved on site, and then the remainder would need to be removed regardless of that. Again, it's due to the position of the house. The lot is extremely restrictive, and if you adhere to the setbacks, both the front and the back, the trees wouldn't be able to be saved in this scenario.
Thank you. So all the prior staff conditions are now accommodated in the revised plan. I think it's fair to say there was a mix-up with Mr. Garrett's previous builder, which kind of led to us not being able to come to terms. But his new builder has figured out that it's easily doable and has accommodated all those. So we're just now talking about the original request to remove the 2 specimen trees. So we've kind of gone all the way back to the beginning and come full circle. We do have one person who's registered to speak on this item, Kimberly Pons from 12323 North Lakeshore Drive.
Correct. Do I have to push this too?
You
Or
do
does it
not.
stay
You're the
on?
only one who gets their finger to rest. Yeah.
All right. So I just want to say I really appreciate that the new plan meets the setback requirements and will preserve as many trees as possible. I've lived on this property for 26 years, and what's happened in the last 3 years is just devastating. I've cut down probably 130 ash trees. My neighbor to the south has cut down at least 50. The person south of them has cut down at least that many, if not more. So we've lost hundreds of trees, and that's changed the water table. If we'd been talking about this build 4 or more years ago, probably nobody would have said anything, right? But the water table has risen because we don't have enough, those trees are gone. So we have standing water everywhere. So I understand this is very difficult, but I want everybody to appreciate how important those trees are. And I'm going to be trying my best to get as many back in the ground as I can. So today is a perfect example. I mean, today was crazy. I've seen water in places I've never seen it before, at levels I've never seen it before. So this is why we're concerned about the grade changes associated with this project. My driveway, I've mentioned before, runs right along for about 100 feet, very close to where this grade is going to be changed the most. I have to repair my driveway. So far, I've had to do it 3 times. The last iteration was 7 years. I don't want that to be, come down to every 2 years or every 3 years. I want to make sure my property is protected. And I think Maddie and Mark want to make sure theirs is too. That's all we're asking for. And I just want to ask the city to, what assurances do I have that the mitigation measures that they're putting in place are actually going to do the job? And that if an issue comes up down the road, that I don't have to wait till there's damage before anything can be done. That's all I'm asking for. And so I have another question on the plan. Now I understand we are excavating, or they are excavating 2 to 4 feet, not a full 8-foot basement. That's what the plan is showing now. Is that correct, Lance? Because I think I've heard you say you wanted a 9-foot basement.
Please make your comment. This is an open dialogue.
Okay.
Just comments and then we'll
All
respond.
right. So I have a question. What is it, an 8-foot basement or a 9-foot basement? If it's a 9-foot basement, does that mean that the footing elevation comes down a foot? So I have that question. And then are we looking at an overall grade change of 4 feet, or is it something else? I just want to make sure I understand what's going on. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Cole, I believe you sent out an email earlier today that explained some of that. Why don't we just recap?
Yeah, quick recap. The grading plan is shown. I suppose I could bring it up here. 22. Thanks, Mike. So the grading plan as shown at the, I think the question was what the depth was that the basement footings would be implemented. I think originally the home was proposed almost all above grade, including the basement. Now the applicant's proposing sinking that into the ground below existing grade, I should say, about 2 to 4 feet, according to this plan. And there is one discrepancy on the plan here. It's just, I think the grading designer forgot to change a note. It says assuming 9-foot wall or a 9-foot basement on the bottom there on the left, but the difference between the foundation top and the footing is 8 feet. So we would just ensure that that top of top of wall is maintained.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission? I guess some of those questions are more appropriate for the final grading plan. This is just a preliminary for the site. It's really not totally germane to the question on the 2 trees, which is what we're voting on today. But that will be taken care of in the building permit process later. This is just on the 2 trees. So any questions from the commission? Commissioner Chorin.
Well, I was going to ask about the grading plan, but I think you've addressed that with the final grading plan. All the concerns that have been expressed and written here should be addressed.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer.
Oh, I have to hold it the whole time. Oh, heaven's sakes. Okay.
Your thumb's going to get tired.
Yeah. So I guess a few things. We continue to talk about how it's I've heard it from multiple people, including Mr. Stoker, who, as a builder, and just as we know, sort of his general tendencies for him to say that this is a very particular parcel, I think that carries a lot of weight. I just heard Mike say the same thing. So I guess what I struggle with is that because it is so particular, because it has 2 existing neighbors that have a lot of concerns, maybe we can go through. There's been a lot of time and energy that's been spent delving into this, as one would if you were a neighbor that was in such close proximity and were concerned about your property. Mayor Nurbin, you just said that some questions were more appropriate. Perhaps we could talk through it. I don't know whether this belongs to Cole, Mike, I don't even know who would answer this, but what the rest of the process looks like so that the neighbors can understand that. I understand today we're just voting on the 2 trees. Mr. Garrett, at the last meeting, I remember you tried to sum it up and say you're going to deny this because of 2 trees. And I know you were angry and you spent a lot of money in this property, but I hope you realize that there was a whole lot more going on than just talking about those 2 trees last time. And we are still talking about losing an additional 20 trees besides those 2 that we could designate as specimen trees based on the guidelines, right? So just that stuck in my mind after the last meeting, so I just wanted to make sure we were very clear on that. But for the outstanding questions that the neighbors have, can we talk about what the rest of the process looks like so that they understand when they will have opportunity to continue to review how this progresses?
Yeah, so general overview of the process is given this is the specimen trees are approved for removal, the applicant will have to prepare a green infrastructure plan, which is basically, most people put in like rain gardens or something to capture part of the runoff from the house and driveway. So they'll need to run that through city approvals as well as MMSD. In addition, for the building permit itself for the house, we also review the grading plan as part of that. Have a footing and foundation certification to make sure that the elevation of the house is put in per plan. And our inspection division runs the rest for all the home inspections.
So at what point do the neighbors have opportunity to review and I get it, right? It's his land and he owns it, but given the uniqueness of this site, I feel, and because there's a lot of questions, I'm just wondering when they'll have the opportunity to get those answered, unless they're just continually asking you, hey, have you done this yet? Have you done this? Is that the actual recourse?
Normally, the only reason, probably the largest reason that we've had, I have had a lot of communication with the homeowners, the adjacent properties, so that at least we are aware when we're reviewing this. Normally, the grading would just be compared to a subdivision grading plan, which is not the case in this part because it's just a infill lot, old, division. So, yeah.
So you're the recourse. Staying in touch with Cole.
Right.
That's
This
okay.
is the last action needed by this body. Yeah. Are there any additional questions or a motion? Commissioner Chorn.
A motion to approve the removal of the 2 trees and all the conditions that the staff have stated.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions from the commission? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
I think there was a 1 no. That motion passes. Please stay in touch with Cole to get updates if you're interested in following the details as the plans come across the city desk. All those documents are submitted are public documents and can be viewed by anyone, so feel free to visit Cole at City Hall or ask questions.
Thank you.
Next item, we have Stantec Consulting Services for Kellner Highland Property LLC. Applicant is seeking a fill permit approval for 2,835 cubic yards to allow for wetland fill to create 3 future home building pads for the property located at 4550 West Highland Road. Looks like this item is also Cole.
It is. So as you mentioned, this applicant is proposing fill exceeding 1,000 cubic yards. So that's what the item is here tonight. Applicant is proposing 3 home pads on one property at 4550 West Highland Road. The only notes I had here, wetlands are present here in their fill location. However, this has been reviewed by the DNR as being artificial wetlands. Therefore, the protections don't apply to this specific pocket of wetlands. So they have all their approvals for that as provided. And then I just wanted to note that since these are all on one lot and it's pre-land division for these 3 pads, that this work doesn't guarantee the exact geometry of any CSM or anything like that. So that will come at a later date and a later approval. Otherwise, staff recommends approval with the 3 conditions that we have.
Thank you. Before we get too much farther, there is one person who registered to speak on this item. Steve Schrader wishes to speak, but did not check the box if he supported or opposed.
Thank you. So I'm Steve Schrader. I live at 13255 Green Bay Road. And I just have a couple simple questions, and it might be premature, but where will the access be to that property for all the fill that's coming? Is my first question. Second question is, once those homes are built, where will their driveway access be? And finally, is this the beginning of multiple homes being built on that property? I know it's only 3 at this moment. So I don't know if it's too early to answer those questions, but it would be helpful to the residents around the property.
Will you have any more comments? Otherwise, we'll jump over to trying to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schrader. Cole, I'm not sure if we know that yet. It sounds like your comment on this work being done pre-CSM would indicate that we don't have all such details at this time.
That's correct. The applicant isn't applying for a land division as part of this. This is just for the fill. So, we don't have the exact plan from the applicant. I was just going to add to real quickly that he referenced the access for the fill itself. We would require a haul route as part of this fill permit that basically mitigates the amount of travel on city streets for the hauling.
Thank you. I'm not sure if the applicant can fill in any of the blanks or if they know any of those details or even willing to share them if they know. But I'd invite you to try and answer as many as you can.
If I can figure out Mike.
You got to push and hold until the green lights up, and then you got to keep on holding. See how long your finger can hold on.
Okay. It's not lighting up unless you can hear me.
Maybe try the next one. Maybe they could have a dead connection into the floor.
Okay.
Or come up to the podium. Then you don't have to.
Okay. Sorry, couldn't see the light there. Yeah, so there will be no import of fill. All the fill's coming from site, so there's no haul road from public property. Access is from the existing private drive on site. This is for future planning, so the rough approximate location of a future home is noted. But yes, it's land division for this 20-acre parcel. And it's just doing estate planning, so there's no actual plan for these homes to be built now. It's a matter of the wetland permitting that was accomplished.
So I see people shaking their heads in back that they couldn't hear you. I guess you do have to get uncomfortably close to the mic. But for those that couldn't hear, the fill is not being brought in from off-site. It's being relocated from on-site. So there'll be no hauling in and out, and the access to the site will be through the existing private drive. And there's no plans to divide at this time. It's just for future planning. So I think that answers as many of the questions as we can get to tonight. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Or is there a motion?
The only thing I thought of as I was reading this one is there's been a lot of whether we want to leverage this forum to address this or not. There's a lot of chit chat on social media forums such as Nextdoor about how the Planning Commission and the city just fills wetlands sort of willy-nilly, which is not actually the case. And so I tried to get smarter about what the artificial wetland is. So is it worthwhile to try to go on record and so that if anyone were ever to try to look at the archives, or if they're watching this meeting really excitedly right now, that we can explain what it
I would
is?
welcome the commentary.
Well, I'll try, but I'm not cool. I mean, I think it said it was two different things. There's it has to be not federally protected wetland. That was one thing. And then the artificial part was not wetland that had existed sort of inherently, but it was as the result of some other development. And I think the date in there was, if you could look at aerial views or whatever records that predated 1991 was the date that I found. So if there was evidence that nothing had existed there prior to that time, then it's designated. And there's some other parameters in there. I'm simplifying it, but it was that it meant that those wetlands were not necessarily wetlands per se, but as a result of maybe some other development and some other displacement. And I think in this case, the very large pond that's on this property, it said maybe helped to create those wetlands. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's correct, and that does sum it up pretty well. And that page 32 in the packet also has a letter from the DNR that basically says exactly what they're looking for these types of exemptions. If with all the viewers that are watching right now and interested.
Thank you. That is an important point to make, though. We don't actually permit the fill of wetlands. That's done by the state and the DNR. So often we'll get requests for fill, but the portion of the wetland filling has to be handled through the state. So it's if you see wetlands being filled, it's not us. Blame the DNR. Commissioner Parrish.
I'd move to approve per staff recommendations 1 through 3, in addition to a hauling permit if they decide to do any hauling being required.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? I see Commissioner Chorin's finger is on the button. Going once, going twice. Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the fill permit's approved. Next up, we have Ozaukee County Planning and Parks Department. The applicant is seeking a fill permit to allow for 4,342 cubic yards for construction of stormwater treatment for the Mequon Golf Course. This area is adjacent to the property located at 6333 West Bonnewell Road. We get to have Cole again, and by now his finger's getting very tired.
This is also a minor request for a fill permit, fill quantity exceeding 1,000 cubic yards. The county is proposing a series of small ponds at the Mequon Golf Course property for water quality. Nothing much with this one on our end other than confirmation on tree removal is confirmed by the city forester. Otherwise, everything else is pretty standard.
Thank you. Commissioner Chorn.
I found it confusing in the report. It made some reference to that people might get confused on the roadway and end up in this. And I for the life of me, I couldn't see that on the plans. Is there a way that you can explain that?
Yeah, I had a hard time explaining or finding how to put that in text. So on the screen here, this is their through driveway, and they're planning on implementing these. They're like 9 or 10 feet deep basins right at that curve. So this is the curve there. That's the pavement removal highlighted, and here's the pond area. This is rotated now 90 degrees, but only concern was just if it's at night or something, people driving through being used to how this has been for a long time, not realizing there's a steep drop off into a pond here where the driveway used to be.
So they have to drive into the parking area and then through and out. Okay.
Correct.
I assume we're just recommending they post a sign or something along those lines.
Yeah, it wasn't too specific as long as there's some sort of visual indicator.
Yeah, we don't want to burden the fire department with responding to that.
The dive team always could use some work. We don't get out much.
No.
So.
Let's hope that's not the training case we have to respond to. So any further comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Becky Schaefer.
Just on the timing, is there any, and I don't even know who answers that, but what the projected timing is? Like, might it be done in time for this baseball season or probably not? Just wondering if there's any idea.
I am not sure. I think it would be this year. They're doing it as part of a grant through DNR. So, but
I think we might have an answer to the question.
Matt can
Please
answer.
say, yeah.
See if I can figure this out. Okay, here we go. For timing, we do intend to and hope to start construction this spring and this summer, and probably a month or two worth of work. So hopefully by the end of the summer it would be completed.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Commissioner Parrish.
Thanks for doing this project. I guess a question to staff, why didn't you recommend a physical barrier? And maybe that's a moot point if you were going to do a physical barrier anyways as part of your plan in that corner.
I only put it in the body of the report. I didn't require it as a condition. We certainly can.
That was just the question, is like,
Yeah.
what made you decide to point it out as like a danger and then not put it in as a recommendation?
I thought
Is
it
that a moot point, or are you putting something there?
We don't have plans for a permanent physical barrier currently. We were leaning towards probably some highly visible signage.
High vis signage sounds like it would do the trick. Or some big boulders. I don't know if you have any boulders on site you can relocate, but
We typically do use boulders for barrier protection around some of the parking lots, so that's kind of a aesthetically pleasing feature that we could certainly consider. Absolutely.
sounds like we're inching towards a motion.
I would move to approve per staff's recommendations.
Second.
Motion and a second. Commissioner Chorin?
Can we have a amendment adding a visual barrier or landscape barrier?
Yeah, I would accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, a motion with a modification, a friendly amendment to include some sort of visual or physical barrier.
By that pond.
Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Look forward to seeing this project done. Thank you. Next up, we have City of Mequon. We're presenting to ourselves. Applicant is seeking a building plan approval to allow for a pavilion located at 10103 West Donges Bay Road, Lemke Park. And Lori's got this one.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, so City of Mequon is requesting a building plan approval for an 810 square foot accessory structure at Lemke Park. The building will be used, will include a small covered courtyard, concession area, storage area, and some restrooms. You might notice that in your packet, it doesn't contain the usual type of items we typically review at Plan Commission for building projects. According to the zoning code, all uses and structures located on a property zone park district are subject to Plan Commission review and approval. However, lighting, landscaping, signage are all reviewed through the Park and Open Space Board. So that's why you're going to see something a little bit different. With that said, staff will only be providing a review and staff recommendations on the building and site plan tonight. Here, do you mind like putting on the one of the renderings, please? As my pal Mike here is getting this together. As you can see in the rendering, the proposed building will be constructed adjacent to the existing pavilion, or when the rendering comes up. The proposed building's facade will be constructed out of a combination of natural stone and composite siding and a color palette that will match the existing pavilion. The new structure and existing pavilion will be covered with standing seam metal roofing to match one another. Steel doorways will be used throughout the structure with the exception of the insulated aluminum garage doors that open up to the concession area. The building meets all setback requirements. Thank you, Justin. Much better. So as I was saying, the building meets all setback requirements. Plan staff supports the proposed structure's compatibility to the existing structure and recommend approval. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Unless there's any specific questions, I mean, I'd be happy to answer any.
Commissioner Bach.
I just had a question on the funding, just so I know how this all works. So it says, you know, in that little chart you had, it says these are the possible funding sources. So how does that work as far as when you give the green light to go ahead and begin this project? How much money do you need? And then do you work with groups to, come up with the difference? How does that, just explain how that all works?
So approximately 90% of the funding has already been attained. So through the ARPA funding that we've attained, that was designated for the project, also the park impact fees, that basically $900 from every unit that's built in, or not built, but every unit that's purchased in Mequon, we get a park impact fee from that state statute. And so the $900 has been accruing over the years here. And I think now we have a little bit over $325,000 to add to that. The other park funding would be either private funding that would be coming from BOSS, a combination of BOSS, baseball, Cardinal football, and then North Shore United. And then obviously the brick sales that you saw in there would be for the smaller end of people wanting to contribute. And then we also have $50,000 of capital that the parks would put into that for the building.
Thank you. That's good to understand. So a good chunk of this is taken on by the federal government, giving us those ARPA funds. So the city received somewhere around $2.5 million a year and some change ago. So this is one of the things that made the cut for our list of ways to spend that windfall that we received. So we're taking care of some old things that need to be taken care of and accomplishing some new projects that'll benefit this park in particular. And then if there's a small shortfall, as usual, the city will be the bank for that till we can true up the ledger sheet at the end of the project. But Commissioner Chorin.
Obviously, there's sanitary and sewer and water needed for the facilities. I think there was some mention in the report. I don't recall how that's being addressed.
So there'll be a mound system with this build, and then it'll be on well because it's out of the sewer service area, and then it also we don't have water in the area either.
Any additional comment or feedback from the commission or questions? Hearing none, it's always appropriate to make a motion.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that moves on. Thank you. Looking forward to it. It's been on the wish list for quite a while. Next on the agenda, we have Zimmerman Architectural Studios for Aurora Health Center. The applicant is seeking a building and site plan amendment approval to allow for a one-story, approximately 2,700 square foot addition. I believe the staff recommendation was to table this item.
That's correct, Mayor. The current Aurora building and parking lot do not conform to the town center zoning district setbacks. The zoning district requires that the building wall abut each street on a corner lot no less than 10 feet from the property line to reinforce the street wall, much like we see at Foxtown Brewery. In relation to this requirement, no parking lot is permitted between the street and the building. So unfortunately, the applicant's proposal did not improve the nonconformity of the building setback and actually increase the nonconformity of the parking lot setbacks. Staff also identified several other serious town center district standards not being met during the review process. Therefore, staff is recommending to table this item to allow staff more time to continue to work with the applicant on revisions. The applicant is well aware of our recommendation to table this item. They've been so far really great to work with. We've already scheduled a meeting for later in this week to start working on those revisions.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion to table.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item's tabled. That brings us to Bonnie Lake Real Estate LLC for Life Space Communities. The applicant is seeking PUD amendment and concept plan approval to allow for additional carriage homes for the property located at 12500 through 12700 Northport Washington Road, otherwise known as Newcastle Place. Take it away, Jack.
All right, this is the first time using this button thing, so we'll see how it goes. All right, so this is a little bit of a history lesson here. We're going to go back to the originally approved plan. This was back in 2000. This was approved. At the time, it was rather contentious approval. There was nothing in this area, as you can imagine, back in 2000. So the common council at the time, when they approved the zoning, they approved it with a number of conditions as part of the PUD. So as you can see, this site plan shows what originally was proposed on the north side of the property, and then this is what showed on the south side of the property. It didn't quite get built this way, but there were conditions in the PUD that dictated how it had to be built. At the time, they dictated that it had to be 6.89 units an acre. I'm not sure where they came up with the full number of that, but it was 6.89 units an acre and a 77% open space requirement. They also required that within 10 years, the entire project had to be built out. So that was the original one in 2000, and then I'll show you what happened. In 2007, the second phase was proposed and approved. So in this phase, they changed the makeup and the count of the number of units. So in this phase, you see there's a large building here. This is a 50-unit building, and then they built a number of these carriage homes. So that lowered the density quite a bit, but it also impacted the green space ratio because obviously there's more impervious surface required for these homes. This 6-unit little section here, this was never constructed. So in 2010, this PUD technically expired under the code because nothing was completed within 10 years. So that brings us to today, where the applicant is actually asking for several changes to that original approval, which I did redline in the ordinance report. Let me just get back to the proposal. So this kind of shows two phases of the proposed plan. The top one is the first phase and the bottom of the second phase. This phase shows a number of carriage homes in this area, roughly 13 of them, and then a couple scattered throughout the site at a later date. So in order to accomplish this, the applicant is asking for a change to that open space ratio from 77% to 60%. They're also asking that we remove the condition that requires common council automatic conditional confirmation of the conditional use grant. In 2007, there was really no controversy at the time that second phase was done, and neither was no public comment at the planning commission or at the common council. The common council still would have the right to call it up with 2 aldermen or the mayor and an alderman calling it up, but they're asking to remove that condition that it automatically gets done with regard to the conditional use grant. The third issue is in terms of the open spaces, they're dropping at 60%. There's a couple things that has happened since this original approval. As you can see up in this location here, this land was all dedicated for the I-43 project. They also lost some land along Port Washington Road when they dedicated the right of way, and then they picked up. There was a single family home that was located in this area here. They picked that up recently. So now there's, instead of 50 acres, there's a net of 47 acres. So staff does approve of the conditions that they're asking to be changed. We did add a couple qualifiers to that, though. We did modify the original approval, saying that we would not want to see any removal of specimen trees. We just don't want to have that battle later on. This whole section of the site is full of specimen trees, and we just don't want to have that battle later on. So we're adding a condition that there no specimen trees be removed. We're also adding a condition that no building be constructed that's over 2 stories in height. With the a number of buildings allotted based on the 6.89 units an acre, there still would be a potential for additional buildings on the site, and we just did not want to see another 3 or 4 story high-rise building, so we're adding that as a condition as well. So with that, we're supportive of the changes that are being requested, and this will go on to common council for public hearing in next month or in 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like, well, is this item, Robin? We have someone registered to speak. Patrick Rochford supports, wishes to speak. He's from 1407 West River Forest Drive. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Rochford, 1407 West River Forest Drive. I'm here to speak in support. We've been there through all phases of Newcastle Place. It's the best neighbor. I hope I've been as good a neighbor as Newcastle has been. We saw the fights for the first phase, and it came to be beautiful. The second phase, when they raised a crane with a flag to show how high it's going to be, and that came out to be very nice. And now I'm supporting phase 3. There are personal items here that came to front today with our rains and our freezing and everything. If you follow the hydrology of the area, it starts by the tennis courts at Concordia. It goes underneath the railroad tracks, underneath I-43, up to the back of Newcastle Place, along the back, down to the retention pond or detention. I don't know which it is. Does it retain or detain? And when they built the second phase, that dramatically changed the watershed for us. My property is across Port Washington, across Dorothy, and the actual watershed outlines the back of my property and the west side of my property. We probably have 300 feet of that. Today it was 32 inches from nothing up to 32 inches deep. So the hydrology is very important in the area. I'm glad to see they've got ponds in there, because as you put more streets and put more houses in, the water level is going to rise on my property right next to us in that easement. I do appreciate that the city has said don't touch the trees. We have, as if any of you have ridden by there, there's an oak that's been there. It's a classic oak. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, when Newcastle promised initially they would not harm the housing there, they let the Sears house that was in that woods just deteriorate until it fell apart. It's demolition by neglect. They've reformed their ways. I'd like to know what they plan for the woodlot now, if it's going to be a public space or if in 5 years they're going to look for more housing in there. But I do support this because they've been a really good neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're back to the commission now. Are there any questions from the commission or comments on the proposal? Jack?
I just want to add one thing. My finger was getting sore, so I got to just cut it off. But I just want to elaborate a little bit on this 10-year
You have
expiration.
5 of them.
I know I did switch now. I want to elaborate a little bit on this 10-year expiration. I did speak with our city attorney on that, and he felt that the language as it was originally drafted was maybe not totally legally enforceable because there has to be some sort of reversion clause to that. So I guess our suggestion is that we just don't have a expiration. We have the conditional use process. If something happens in 10 years where our policies change with regard to setback or with regard to stormwater, that all would still have to be in play for whatever is currently there. So we just didn't feel there would be a need to have this sunset clause. If the commissioner or the council feels differently, then we would actually have to put in there that there would have to be a public hearing on X date in 10 years from the date of approval to formally revert the zoning back to some other approval. And I didn't find it to be necessary. So we struck that whole entire section.
That sounds good. Could you remind us too what our normal open space ratio is for a similar development in our code as a standard requirement?
For new construction, it's 40%.
So even at 60%, this will be greatly exceed what a new proposal would do elsewhere. So that's important to point out too. It's hard, almost 2 decades after the original proposal to believe that Newcastle was ever contentious. I think people's public perception of it has changed greatly over time, and it's interesting to see some of the provisions we put in there because we were so worried about it, and now it's gained widespread acceptance. So I agree with the staff recommendations to take some of those needless things out, because if there's aldermen who have a problem with it and we expect them to pay attention to what's going on, they can, 2 aldermen or I and another alderman can always call it up at any time anyway. So we don't need to automatically review things at council like this. Commissioner Bach.
Just a question on how this is shared with residents. So I know you probably don't have to share the plans with residents or do an open forum for, hey, this is what's coming. It's probably not, you don't have to do any of that or requirement. I just don't know if that happens as a courtesy or if that's planned, or how you inform other residents that this is happening.
Here we go. I'm pushing. Did I push well? So there has not been a formal presentation to the residents, but of course the yellow sign out in front caused questions and things like that. But in general, the purpose of this is because there are residents or potential residents who are looking for additional carriage houses and always wondering what's happening. So this is a commitment to carriage houses versus, as Jack said, a larger, plex building of some sort. So.
Commissioner Parrish.
Thank you. Thank you to the applicant for expanding this wonderful facility in our community. It's a great investment. I know that Fred was kind enough to send this to us, Alderman Guerrero, myself, and the mayor about a month ago, so we could start kind of researching it. I know that he subsequently met with Jack Zader. All their concerns were addressed, and I don't think any aldermen have any concerns about this. We're very supportive and appreciative of the investment. Got me thinking about, because I noticed it was tax exempt and there was a pilot years ago. What, you're nodding at me? No, is it not tax exempt?
There was a condition that if it ever did go tax exempt, there'd be a pilot. It is currently not tax exempt.
All right, good. So thank you. I'm very supportive of it and appreciate it.
Commissioner Chorin.
Jack, I don't know if I just can't read the plans, but I would assume that there's some detention area that I don't see on there. Because I think where those are being planned, there's a fairly significant pond, isn't there?
There's a pond shown basically in this area here. And I think on their proposed plan, there's some pond wetland areas back here. Now, again, this is concept plan, so we're not at that level yet, but they're just showing areas that potentially could be used for stormwater management.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer.
Just want to confirm, Mr. Bursch, that you're comfortable with the no tree removal and that you believe you can get the yield. I just don't want it to come back and say, oh, guess what? Can't make this profitable unless I remove these trees. So we won't hear that.
So we've had that discussion with the current ownership. The ownership has changed. And as Jack said, our goal was to get all of the requirements of the planned unit development to be in line with the ordinance. So we've reduced the, some of those issues, but we added a stronger tree preservation requirement for this one specific property. We do see that in this first phase of 13 homes, there are no problems, there are no conditions that we would need to be working around. There's that one large oak tree which will be preserved next to a wetland. In the future phases, as we look at developing additional homes, some of the homes on the on the east side of the property, the 4 that are shown on the top of the lower plan, have some tree problems, and the ownership has told me that yes, we will reluctantly accept a higher standard for this always contentious property for that purpose. But we have some other opportunities that we don't know that they'll ever be developed or not. But this is a cluster of 13 homes that makes a lot of sense, and we're not coming back with whole scale revisions. What was affectionately known as the birdhouse property, it's in the narratives in several cases as birdhouse, was not owned by the original developer of the property, was not owned by the new owner of the property until quite recently. That site, if you look at the wetland delineation, which has been completed, is a difficult one to develop, and it's also a difficult property to connect to the internal access for the property. So we don't know how that one will be developed. But the goal is to develop a comfortable campus of additional less than 2-story buildings, as Jack has suggested.
Yep. I think it makes a ton of sense. Just wanted to confirm that part. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? I think it looks fantastic. I'm assuming it'll get broad support once I call the question here. Any last words? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Has there been a motion?
I'll make a motion to
Okay,
approve.
let's do that first.
Second.
Otherwise, we'll see you next month.
Conditions.
There was a motion and a second. Okay, now all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Congratulations. Next up, we have some announcements. The first is an item on the Girac accessory structure approval from, I believe, last month or 2 months ago, maybe. And Cole's going to give us a little update. We didn't have to bring this back to you, but a couple of things changed because we realized we asked for something we had no legal right to ask for. I just wanted to make sure everyone on the commission understood exactly what was going on, and this just wasn't happening behind the scenes with staff. We just wanted to be all above board in open meeting, even though we probably didn't have to. Take it away, Cole.
Yeah, so like Mayor said, it's just 2 conditions that were added. Actually, is all the way back in November for an accessory structure on Bonnewell Road. Was just in for a minor request with building for their egg property. 2 of those conditions were actually in a portion of our code that's exempt on agricultural properties. So we're going to be removing those 2 conditions at staff level. Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions for Cole? Special rules for ag uses. Just wanted us to be aware of that in case we see it again. So thank you for that update, Cole. Next announcement is the next meeting is Monday, March 21st, 6 o'clock right here. And I'd like to take a informal poll of those who are able to attend. I will not be one of them, it turns out. So if everyone who will be here, please if you will be here, please raise your hand. Is it a Tuesday? Is there an error in the? It must be the 20th then. Okay, so that Monday. If it's the 20th, I'll take your word for it. I don't have a calendar up. We've got a couple. Um, Brian's feverishly checking his phone.
I can stand in for you, Mayor.
Perfect. Okay, we at least got someone to chair the meeting. That's important. And we'll scrape together a quorum, but want to get an informal poll. I think staff will send out an email to get a more accurate count going forward because we obviously want to make sure we can hold the meeting. All right, that brings us to a grouping of policy items, the first of which is an ordinance amending Chapter 58, Section 58-640 of the Mequon Municipal Code, redefining the reimbursement options for sanitary sewer costs. So I think Director Lundin is going to walk us through this and explain things.
Good evening, Commissioners. We have an existing ordinance that applies to any sanitary sewer utility costs associated with development. That could be for things like the upsizing of pipe that may be required for the ultimate system, but that isn't needed for the immediate development. The existing ordinance states that in order to have any public funds attributed to the project, that the project would have to be publicly bid by the city and then only move forward for construction after the developer has posted 125% of the construction cost with the city. We actually haven't had to exercise this clause within my time of being here, but in quick succession here, we're going to have two different developments that will warrant reimbursement from the city. And so in a review of that language, we would like to propose language that would offer the city the opportunity to leverage the private development cost efficiency with development to the benefit of the sewer utility. We've proposed language that would allow the developer then to still follow the state bidding requirements, but be able to leverage that private process to hopefully the cost benefit of the utility. We're not proposing to remove the existing language. This would just be otherwise added as another option. And if ultimately approved, then we would recommend that the Water Utility Commission modify the water connection policy for the same language, but as it would apply to the water utility.
Thank you. I think in summary, we'll just try to make it easier for private development to get work done that's of the same quality and standards we'd require otherwise, and just kind of streamline the process. I think this should work for everyone based off my understanding of it. So are there any questions from the commission? Or a motion?
A motion to...
You can make a motion to do whatever you want.
Motion,
Approve, hopefully.
motion of approval for the change in the language in the ordinance?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that item is moved on to the council, I believe. Or at least the Sewer Utility District Commission and then the council. So, fill the agendas up for the next couple of months. Next up, we have an ordinance amending Chapter 58 of the Zoning Code, modifying Section 58-420, Prin 4, regarding turf grass to account for no mow May. Take it away, Assistant Director Zader.
Sorry, I knew that was going to happen. This came out of public welfare. Unfortunately, I don't see the packet information didn't get in the electronic packet for some reason.
It's these two items are juxtapositioned in the packet, so if you click on item 3, you'll get item 2 and vice versa. So it's in there.
Oh, okay, I don't know what happened. I mean, there's really not much to it. All we're doing is changing the date to say that our 8-inch grass requirement is in effect from June until December 31st. So basically from January till June 1st, we can't enforce the grass being 8 inches, which obviously most of that time is never going to be 8 inches. Even in May, it's difficult, but the Public Welfare Committee felt that we should have codified the requirement instead of just having staff defer any enforcement issues until June 1st. I did speak with our code enforcement officer last year. There was no grass complaints in May whatsoever, and he didn't think at the time it could even got to 8 inches last May. So we don't see this as a major change. We just want to codify it and put it in the code so that there is no confusion regarding the issue.
Thank you. And this will help help our bees get an earlier start, which is good. We're a bee city, so this is congruent with that designation. I know my bees will enjoy it. So for those of you who don't know, I keep bees. I hope they survive the winter. We'll find out in a few weeks here. And I also agree. I don't think there's very much concern about having 8-inch tall grass in May. That's usually a problem for mid-June and on. Maybe if we had an extraordinarily early thaw and we got some grass growing, it might happen, but I doubt it. Are there any comments or questions from the commission? This has been something a few members of the public have been asking for maybe a year and some change, and it's finally percolated up to our level here.
I would move approval of the text amendment.
A motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No mo may. Gets passed on to the council, I believe, right? This is a zoning change, so thank
Yes,
you.
it'll go to council.
All right, we'll talk about it again shortly. The next item, ordinance amending Chapter 58 of the zoning code, modifying Table 58-249 regarding setbacks and offsets in the R2 zoning district. This is still in Jack's court.
Yeah, this kind of came up with the Board of Appeals case we had recently regarding some solar panels in the front yard setback. And the question was, why is our R2 zoning district different pretty much than every other zoning district? And I did not have an answer for that. I've been here 17 years, and predates me. So all we did was, and I have the highlighted up on the screen, we changed the front setback to match pretty much every other zoning district except the R1, which is the 5-acre zoning. So there's a setback based on the classification of the road. And then we also changed the side yard setback. As you can see, it's 30 feet, and then it drops to 25, and then for some reason it went back up to 30 feet. So we matched it down to 25 feet to match the R1B, which is a 2.5 acre. Most of our R2 currently is either located along the river or along Lake Michigan, which has actually narrow lots that they don't conform. So now they can actually take advantage of the formula to get a little bit smaller setback on some of these non-conforming lots. And also, a lot of the time is that 75-foot front setback actually push people a little closer to the bluff or closer to the river, which is kind of counterproductive in terms of trying to protect those environmental issues. So with that, we made these changes. It did go to public welfare. They approved it. This will also go to common council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Seems pretty straightforward. Going once, going twice. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve per
Second.
staff's recommendations.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item moves on to council. Next up, ordinance amending Chapter 58 of the zoning code, modifying sections 58-301 Prin 9 and 58-302 Prin 9 regarding building and site plan requirements in the town center and arrival corridor zoning districts.
Yes, this came about recently on February 14th. The Common Council approved roughly $5 million in funding for the remaining public improvements of the town center zoning area. So basically, at this point, the TIF is within 5 years of its closure date, so we're not allowed to spend any money past April of this year for public money. So going forward, we added a condition to the building and site plan requirement in both the town center and the arrival corridor that basically states that any public improvements that would be needed on a property would have to be done as part of their approval process for their building and site plan approval. So this would include potentially street trees, benches, potentially on-street parking, things like that, things that we've required that we've done along Weston Avenue in front of Foxtown, on Bunch Rock Avenue in front of Artesa. We just don't have the funding available to pay for this anymore, so it's going to have to come from somewhere. And so we're putting the onus on the private developer to take care of that moving forward. So we had to be somewhat vague because every block is a little different. Mequon Road, we're not going to have obviously any on-street parking. Cedarburg Road, there probably wouldn't be either, but there's some portions of Weston and Buntrock that may have on-street parking. They all would be required to have street trees anyway, but we would require a certain palette that we follow in the town center. So there'll be some determination by staff at the time of each one of these projects coming forward to determine what they would actually need. This is a zoning change, so this will also go to common council for approval.
Thank you. Yeah, the TIF well's running dry, so we have to reflect that in our ordinances so it's clear what we expect of private development in these areas. Commissioner Chorn.
So Jack, they would still be obligated to meet the design criteria, but they would fund it, right?
Correct. This is they would have to fund it all on their dime. In the past, we've either cost shared or we paid for a lot of the public side improvements, but we're no longer able to do that.
Good question. Any further comments, or is there perhaps a motion?
How about a motion to approve?
Motion to approve is good. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? That too goes on to council. Lastly, we have approving the Uleo Creek Design Guide related to the site design, architecture, signage, and public amenities for the Uleo Creek neighborhood. And for this, we've got Kim, who's sat here through the whole meeting waiting to talk to us about this item. But she has a well-rested finger.
Oh, right.
Go ahead, Kim.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Commissioners. Some of you are well familiar with the Uleo Creek neighborhood. There are a number of you who served on the Planning Commission Policy Subcommittee. We worked hard for 18 months to come up with 4 new zoning districts. The entire neighborhood is about 750 acres, although about half of that is in critical environmental designated areas. The new zoning districts were approved in January of 2022, and they referenced 2 items that are now being taken care of. One was the linear park. So the Uleo Creek neighborhood has a 10-mile looped linear park. This map shows that it's a map that we previously created for policy discussion. It's a little hard to read in here, but it does show prospective areas for the pathways. It does highlight areas where there might be some obstacles in the continuation of that park of that linear park pathway. We did take that to the Park and Open Space Committee. They have adopted it as part of their master plan. And the second piece that is referenced in the zoning districts and contemplated by the policy subcommittee were a set of design guidelines. We have that for the town center. Much of our discussions in terms of developing the zoning and designating certain land uses, as well as arriving at specific technical standards in the Uleo Creek zoning districts, the committee talked a lot about preservation of the rural character and making sure that we're maintaining that and enhancing it as development happens. So everything from, building massing to the type of traffic that the land uses we're going to generate, to open space features, and the public realm, similar to what we just talked about for town center, what that street edge is going to look like in terms of creating some uniformity, as well as making sure it is distinct from the commercial corridor that is south of Highland. So former Mayor Worth put together a ad hoc committee, and they're tasked with a couple different projects, but one of them that they took care of first was the design guidelines for Uleo Creek. So what you have in your packet is a summary of those design guidelines. They do address everything from signage to gateway features to architecture to building massing to building materials and reforms. And ultimately, the decision for this guidebook is in the Planning Commission's hands. It does not advance on to Common Council or any other board or commission. And the ad hoc design committee did approve this on February 7th by a vote of 5-0. There were two items or a couple items in this guidebook that were highlighted that are not complete yet, and those are the maps that we were just showing you. The linear park map is referenced in the guidebook, and obviously a map that shows the context of what Uleo Creek neighborhood actually is, and showcases some of the surrounding context and uses within that neighborhood as well. Our original staff member who created these maps, we're trying to find the original maps on that desktop so that we can make some edits to it so it kind of meets the aesthetic style of the guidebook that we have now, rather than recreating it. If we get to a point in a few more days where we have to start from scratch, we will. But those were the couple items that were highlighted in the guidebook that I suggested as part of the recommendation. Should you feel comfortable approving this tonight, we'll make those amendments and edits and get those maps added at a later time. Any questions? Anything specific in the guidebook from a design perspective or an aesthetic perspective that is of interest to discuss?
Before we get into comments, I just want to thank the ad hoc committee for spending so much time putting this together. It's been a long haul and a big lift, but it's finally here, and I think it'll serve this area of town well into the future, and it'll be good to have something on paper, which is often a challenge in other areas where we get proposals that aren't maybe in alignment with what we'd like. In many instances, we haven't actually formally communicated what we want, and this will help avoid that. So great job to the committee. Can't thank them enough. Now some comments. I saw Commissioner Bach's hand up.
I just was, can you tell me how do they use the guidebook? So is that something that, and could it change in the future? Can it be updated, edited, or is it something that, if a developer comes to you and says, hey, I want to build something here, that you start with that? Is that how that works?
Staff will, at the initial meeting with a developer who's interested in any form of development in the neighborhood, of course, we're going to supply them with the zoning map. We're going to supply them with the particular zoning district that applies. This guidebook is referenced in each one of those zoning districts, so we would also supply this to them. We try to do a lot of work, internally with the developer before it gets to you for approval, so we can help guide them. So this booklet is intended to be used in the same way that the zoning districts would be, just another piece of information. So you asked how the developers would use it. What was your other question? Oh, yes. So it's an administrative, approval. It's not adopted by ordinance other than by reference of the zoning district. So this can be modified, and the planning commission would ultimately have the authority to make any of those edits to it in the future. And, it's likely, just like, you've seen us make changes to the town center and arrival corridor zoning districts over the years, right? When you first create this, you might not contemplate everything that, comes to the table for projects.
Yeah, so we'll be able to change it going forward if we need, but more importantly, if staff suggests someone follow it and they don't, it gives us a little more teeth to say no if we don't want it. Some of the stylistic things are subjective, but there's at least something on paper to go by. It becomes less opinion based and more based off the document.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at the pictures, it is clearly different than the Port Washington Road going south, and
right.
That was one of the premises that we started with, and we heard loud and clear. So I think it's starting to look good.
Commissioner Parrish.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mayor, about thanking the subcommittee. Having served on it with you, it was a labor of love for well over a year. So want to thank you very much for your time away from your families on that, and especially staff. I've seen a lot of communities put this stuff together and they normally need to outsource it, and the fact that you could do this and articulate it just shows the caliber of staff we have, so thank you. I was hoping you could touch quickly, thinking back to former Mayor Avendroth's point about the lighting at the corner, and I actually don't recall seeing anything about lighting in here.
Yes.
Was that part of a different document?
No, the lighting is in here.
Missed that.
It's referenced. It's under the streetscaping section. And Jack and I, because of the two developments that have moved forward, have kind of worked out the rhythm of what we think this light fixture, the street trees, some terrace landscaping needs to be. So the current light fixture is included in this document at this time. We are still trying to work out what, if any, modification there should be to that existing street fixture. We haven't been inundated with complaints about it, but there have been a handful of individuals in the neighborhood that have expressed some concern about it. We don't want to continue to advance that light fixture if it's going to be concerning. And if it doesn't meet the rural character, right? So the single family residential development that you guys talked about at last month's meeting, we talked a little bit about this light fixture. We're going to try to get a handle on it before any implementation is done there. We have had really good communication with the contractor who initially installed it. It's just a little slow in getting some answers about how to resolve it, and we don't necessarily have the equipment to be out there reviewing and doing it ourselves, right? So we'd rather not put ourselves in a position where the city has to spend additional funds to try to get the resolution to this. So we are kind of relying on the contractor at this point. If it is not of interest, and all of you feel that way sitting here today, to continue to utilize that street fixture, there are other options obviously available. There are multiple communities, particularly west of here, that implement a multi-use path to connect their new neighborhoods to their commercial areas. And some of those include Sussex, Merton, Lannon areas. They choose not to illuminate their multi-use path. Our initial intent was really to be able to maximize the use of that path and providing a level of safety and security for people that can utilize the path. The other, obviously, end of the spectrum is to not illuminate it, and we can consider a middle ground, I suppose, of doing bollards. Now you'll get illumination of the path, but I'm not sure you're going to get the security lighting that many users would find comfortable.
So we didn't require lit path as part of this, though, did we? I don't require.
The lighting study that we did with the use of this fixture would provide illumination of that entire multi-use path, and that's really the intent of it.
Good. So I think just retrofitting the existing one that was installed would kind of be of interest to the neighbors, and I like that you're not rushing it until you've selected the right one. I don't know if you have the ability to force that change at the corner, whose cost that is, but obviously it should be cohesive and hopefully soon. And then I guess I was thinking of it more of a policy perspective. And we've had this going for about a year now, and I'm sure you've had several people come talk to you, and I've had a lot of developers come talk to me, and part of the issue will continue to be the water. So we've already decided no sewer down this corridor, and the fact that the water isn't already run down there, it's a build and contribute. By no means am I advocating like a TIF or any sort of incentive like that, but I think that will be kind of the big hurdle for this corridor over the coming years. All the developments are going to be under 25,000 square feet essentially. And so, someone down at the corner to justify spending $1.8 million to bring water all the way down to Pioneer and Port, that's a really big burden. It's hard enough right now with construction costs and the cost of capital. So, I do have, and then on the other hand, what's the hurry for it to get developed? Now that we have these standards and that we can be proud of, and it'll eventually get done right. So I think just long term, it would be interesting to explore water policy and how we can help get this done efficiently without cost to the taxpayers. Just throwing that out there. And thanks again.
Any further comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Jim Schaefer.
I was very pleased to see that the design guidelines included a reference to the rural community, because that's rural. There's still some barns in there, but I thought it was a great job.
Thank you. The example is pictures of the signage work in terms of rural character from your perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. It's good to know they hit the mark. We'd expect nothing less, but hey, it'll take longer. We'll take a little while, but we'll get it right. Yep, I agree. Any further comments or questions, or is there a motion to adopt plan?
I would move to adopt the
Second.
plan.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. That is adopted, and we don't need anyone else to say we got it right. So congratulations. Maybe the only thing you can do without council looking over your shoulder. Next up, we have a motion to adjourn. Hopefully,
So moved.
motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.